Just want to take you to news on the go in the Western Cape. NERSA, of course, kicking off their public hearings, looking into Eskom's application for a 36% electricity tariff hike. Seems to be an impromptu briefing with Caleb Kasib, the CFO of Eskom. Let's listen in.
We need a combination of factors. Eskom needs to drive its own efficiencies, which we agreed to. Secondly, we need to address the municipal debt. Any entity that has 90 billion owing to them is definitely not sustainable. And then last but not least, we need to bring down the debt on the balance sheet. 400 billion cannot be serviced through cash from operations. That is why the debt relief that we got from government at the end of this window, we're looking for that balance sheet debt to come down to 250 billion, which is more sustainable. At the end of the day, if Eskom can't meet its operational and infrastructure requirements, we're not going to delay that, and that has many ramifications going forward. We have no option but through the shareholder to approach government again, and that's what we don't want to do. We need to be sustainable on our own basis, and effectively this application is saying to the regulator there needs to be mechanisms to address affordability. Some is within NERSA's domain, but a lot of it's also got to do with government, like increasing free basic electricity, 50 kilowatts to much more. But that's where National Treasury and the Minister of Finance, Minister of Energy and Electricity must decide on. But you've got to have this balance between what the utility needs and protecting the poor as well, and not being a burden on the fiscus at the end of the cycle.
Mr. Eskom, you also spoke about the output from IPPs that was less than anticipated.
Yeah, so what has happened is been delays in connections of IPPs. We also acknowledge that on the transmission grid there's been capacity constraints which needs to be addressed, and through these hearings you will see NTCSA talk about and explain the need to deliver on the transmission development plan, and that importance to unlock the capacity to the grid and then to connect these IPPs in the future. But whilst there's a lag, then it means generation must step in and pick up the slack.
Mr. forgive me, I don't know if it was addressed already. What are your expectations for the results next year?
So I think we just started the public hearings. All the input must come from various stakeholders. At the end of the day, we're looking for a fair and balanced decision. It is a tough decision for the regulator, but once the decision is made, I think there needs to be mechanisms that ensure the combination of this tariff decision. You need to also deal with this municipal debt. That is a big worry for Eskom, and I think if there's mechanisms to address those two, then we see as Eskom putting us in a much better financial, but more importantly, that leads to better operational performance.
Can you just perhaps tell us again what that figure is for the current municipal debt that needs to be?
90 billion rand currently is owed, and our concern is this is growing by about 1 billion to 1.5 billion per annum, and more concerning is we do see the large metros also increasing their non-payment. Of this 90 billion, about 12 billion is linked to key metros, Swane, City of Joburg, Mfuleni, and that is not sustainable for a utility like Eskom. We also appreciate it doesn't only affect the electricity sector, but it affects the water sector as well.
So forgive me, sir, 445 billion from fiscus.
Yeah. So over the years, if we look at all the support that we've received from government, and if you extend this to the end of the 250 billion debt relief at the end of March 26, cumulatively it will add up to 496 billion. So we asking the question, if you receive 500 billion from the fiscus, why are you still not financially sustainable? It really comes down, as I highlighted, in that quadrant. You need to address the municipal debt. Eskom must be efficient. You need the tariff to allow that return on assets to go up from the 1.6% to what we're proposing, 4%, 5% and 6%. And then at the end of the debt relief period, that debt on the balance sheet comes down to around 250 billion.
All right, last question from my part. You talked earlier about corruption combating roles at Eskom. You've also mentioned some arrests. How many arrests and what's been
Yeah,
done?
so on that, as I said, we'll provide more detail and stats. I don't have it off the top of my head, but if you've seen in the media, arrests around coal activities and coal transport, so that has happened in the recent years. But there's also, the support we're getting from law enforcement agencies and the SIU has been tremendous. We work with them on a weekly basis. Every Thursday we have a joint sitting with law enforcement and our Eskom security to address this issue around fraud and corruption around Eskom and the environment that's facing us.
Obviously, DA was picketing outside and they are vehemently opposed to this application. Your response to that?
So I think at the end of the day, we must look at this application as saying what is required for Eskom to continue operate and to supply the needs of the country, whilst we're doing to invest in the infrastructure as we move forward. Now the question is, if we don't get that application, who's going to then maintain this infrastructure? And we all know at the end of the day, if you take PV in the evening and if you don't have battery storage, who is then going to step in and supply the electricity demand in the night? We've seen in September when we had the snowfalls, there was no PV, etc. Then Eskom had to provide that. So as Eskom and the infrastructure for the country, as this country's battery, there needs to be investment in, someone has to pay for it. So we're not going to get it from the electricity and we can't invest in it. We don't want to go back to where we have interruptions of supply. The biggest detriment to the economy is no electricity. It's not only economic, it affects you emotionally, it leads to lots of other social implications. What we've seen is 235 days of no load shedding. I mean, even in Eskom, people now wear their Eskom PPE, their T-shirts with pride. And that positive momentum is not in this application, but the difference it's made by not load shedding and the pride we have to continue not to load shed and get to an entire year. Believe me, it's like any team. If you're undefeated in the league, you don't want to lose or draw, right? So that's how we are taking the benefit of no load shedding. It's not just generation, it's the entire Eskom, the board and the management. So that's tremendous.
Okay. And then if we look at perhaps just the affordability and we look at this proposed tariff hike, it's several times what the current inflation rate is. And just with ordinary citizens already struggling and being cash strapped, the cost of food is high, cost of water, all these basic services, and the cost of living is extremely high in South Africa. So how does Eskom justify that tariff increase that's several times above inflation, and wouldn't an increase along the inflation lines be more reasonable?
So I think firstly there must be mechanisms to address the vulnerable sectors, be it commercial or residential consumers. And as I said, there's elements where, like we're proposing in terms of the retail tariff plan, let's remove the inclining block rate mechanism. So when you buy electricity for the entire month, you get the same units. Currently, as you buy more, you get less units. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I think this issue around the free basic electricity quantum is a key component that government needs to look at and what they can afford in balancing this. But there is a reality as well. There are other consumers that can afford this, and you must pay for the true cost, because otherwise we are artificially subsidizing the price of electricity. It's not giving the right signals. So there's the balance between those that can afford and mechanisms to protect those that can't. And that's where government and NERSA needs to come up with a solution. But you can't artificially keep the price down when the true drivers to the electricity price requires that to be passed on to the consumer. But the other key element is, even when we are billing, if we are not collecting through the municipal debt issue, it's a big problem. So I think they all need to come together.
Mr. Kasim, just your financials are due next month, I believe. What's the sense? Are you guys making a profit this year? Or
No,
what?
no. And because it's been so long delayed, let's appreciate March 24 was the worst load shedding in our history, 329 days. And then we spent a lot on diesel. So I think if you go on the history based on that operational performance, I've always said that financial performance is the other side of the coin. So you would expect similarly difficult results, if I say that. However, if I fast forward to where we are now in FY25 and I look forward to March 25, no load shedding, you see on a weekly basis we say how much we've saved on diesel. That for me will show a big shift in terms of financial performance. But not March 24, don't quote me wrong, that's going to be a difficult set of results.
Okay. Are you prepared to give a sense a little bit more about what those figures?
No, I can't. You're not allowed to do that when we finalize it.
Well, yes, of course, that was the Chief Financial Officer of Eskom, Caleb Kasim, who was basically just giving us their reasons and their motivation behind this request for the proposed tariff hike that they are calling for. And of course, these public hearings for NERSA and to discuss this proposed hike are currently underway here in Cape Town. Of course, as Kasim was talking, he did explain that a big problem that they are sitting with at the moment is this 90 billion rand in municipal debt, which they are fighting hard and also requesting more intervention to just receive that finance as well, because that is one of the big challenges that they are sitting with. Of course, he did also indicate that they believe that the increase that they are asking for is justified. But these hearings are continuing in Cape Town, and we will bring you further updates at a later stage. Back to you in studio.
Right, Corbin August live to us there from Cape Town. For now, Corbin, thanks very much indeed.